Some people are really unhappy about the whole Google changing Linux for their own needs and making all these extensions for Android, and think that they should have talked more to the standard kernel engineers. I don't actually care, because for me, that's how kernel development has always been done. It's what Red Hat and SUSE and IBM and everybody else used to do themselves. I mean, they used to do their own development, and then we picked up the features that were successful. And to some degree, Google and Android are doing the same thing. Every time there's a fork, I think actually forks are a good thing. Somebody sees a need and technical reason to do something differently from the standard kernel. And most forks are failures. Most forks, it turns out that the thing they needed wasn't actually worth doing, and most forks die. And then some forks are successful, and Google with Android has clearly been very successful. So now we've been talking about how to merge the good parts. That's kind of the point of the GPL, is that you can have these disagreements about how things are done, and then after the fact you can notice that the forking is important. The ability to take a source base and make changes to it is important. But equally important is the fact that the license then requires I wouldn't say the losing party, the party who didn't do the work and didn't believe in what they did can always say, hey, they were right, and take the code. So that's what probably will happen, because Android has been so successful.
It's $199. We're building premium products at non-premium prices.
Most of that is actually not the kernel work. There are a lot of further improvements that Google does to Android. I mean, Android is a distribution, and the kernel is just a small part of it. I mean, I think it's an important part of it, but it's still actually a fairly small part of it. I don't think most of the features there impact us, outside of drivers, for example. I mean, drivers are always something that the kernel ends up having too many of, but that's just hardware. We can change that. I have to say, I don't even know. The people I interact with are the top level maintainers, and none of them work for Amazon as far as I know. Whether Amazon then actively feeds back their changes to the maintainers, I don't know, and to some degree it's not necessarily all that important. I suspect they actually use a fairly standard Linux. I mean, they obviously have, again, drivers for the specific hardware, but that's a fairly small detail. Amazon also on the server side, obviously, a big user. And most of the changes there, I think, are to their user, server cloud infrastructure. And that's okay, and it's how things should work. When you have people who just use the system, they don't necessarily give that much back, because they don't need to make any changes. They use it the way it was designed to be used. The reason Greg didn't like Canonical is that they actually did make changes, they just were not necessarily as active in pushing them back up as Greg wanted them to be. I think actually Greg doesn't complain about Canonical that much anymore, but you had to ask him.
Canonical's business decision is to not contribute, and that's fine, that's perfectly valid, and we have no problem with it.